Hey guys, AnimeWestReacts here. Gonna be reacting to One Piece chapters 1166 and 1167. So yeah, because I didn't do last chapter or missed it. But yeah, getting into it. Aftermath of the battle, we got Rocks on the ground, coughing, saying, or thinking, did they really break the curse? And so yeah, we see Garp and Roger kind of just out cold or barely conscious at the very least. Rock's thinking, come on, stay alive. This island is. And then, yeah. He's like, damn it. It's too late, Roger. Garp, run. You can't die here. And he thinks, oh yeah, there's one more thing I wanted to say. So we see Somers. So yeah. Mafi, Summers, and Garling walking up. And yeah, that's when he's thinking, oh yeah, there's one more thing I wanted to say. Garling raises his sword and stabs Rocks as he thinks, thanks for stopping me. And then you got how's Rocks? And then yeah, transition to running, saying how's Rocks? Gabon says, you worrying about the enemy? And then Carp says, I'm your enemy too. And Roger says, Rayleigh, tell me what happened to Rocks. And so Rayleigh says he was killed. And so yeah, then we see suddenly it says, hurry, the island's collapsing, don't let the pirates escape. Roger's ship is on the move, fire. And so yeah, we just see a big hole opening in the where God Valley was, and it's kind of just all sinking into this hole in the sea. It says this event would leave a no mark on the pages of history, not leave its mark. The crumbling island was swallowed by the waves and consumed by fog, like curtains closing on a grand stage. And we see, tanks firing. We see Garpin in medical place. Roger the same, getting treatment. Both of them getting treatment. See Lin and Whitebeard kind of just looking off. And it says, that was the essence of the God Valley incident. We see the sky has been split, lightning raining down, and Roger Pirate saying, let's go, full speed ahead. And so yeah, everyone leaving. And it says, the silence in the incident's wake lasted only a moment, before a massive bolt of lightning split the heavens. And with that, the curtain rose for new tales to unfold. So yeah, we see Kaido, we see Garp, or Dragon, not Garp. See Kaido looking around at the sky or something. Dragon like holding a gun. Shanks is asleep in the chest. Kuma, Ginny, and Kuma. Well, Ivanka have Ginny and Kuma. I think I said Kuma twice. But yeah, trading Kuma. And then Teach. Whew. And then we transition again. It says still. And it says hold it in. Just wait till Roger's up. And it says, come on, Captain. I'm dying to open up the treasure chest. And so yeah, we got Roger. Gloriosa just, I guess, was in there with them. Roger saying, sorry to worry you guys. And they're like, yeah, we're thrilled. More importantly, check it out. He's like, don't you care about me at all? And then we got, Rayleigh and Shocky together. It says Shocky's safe and sound, and we scored a ton of treasure to boot. What a great haul. And then you hear a cry. Roger's like, huh? And then goo goo gagas. Or goo and gas. And they're like, what the? It's coming from that chest. There's something in there. Open it carefully. And so, yeah, they open the chest and they're like, huh? A baby? And so, yeah, little Shanks. Laughing. It says Rock's pirates wiped out. Predictably, news coverage was falsified. Only one aspect of the story was highlighted: the heroism of Garp. It says here that the Rock's pirates have been vanquished. So yeah, you got people around the world, I guess, learning the news. Someone yelling, "Rox is dead." I knew it. Vice Admiral Garp is the strongest. They're like, Garp, Garp, he's a hero. And then, yeah, at Navy HQ, it says, what the hell is this article? Like, Vice Admiral Garp. And he's like, I can't wait to get my hands on that Morgan's fella. Now, relax, Garp. He only wrote that stuff because the government paid him off. And I guess Sengoku, yeah, saying the world government and Marines are massive organizations. If you count the number of nations, armies, we're talking about tens of millions of soldiers worldwide. Impossible to count for everyone's actions and motivations. So if the top brass ever strike me as insane, I'd simply turn a blind eye to it. Or Garp says that, and Sengoku's like, then I'd simply, turn a blind eye to it. And he's like, come again? And then, yeah, they start fighting. Garp's like, it's just like I said, you're just another promotion-chasing fool. And Sengoku's like, shut up. What good can you do barking from the bottom of the cliff? And one of the soldiers like, hey, you two. And Garp says, if you ever stray and get corrupted, I'll kill you myself. And then Sengoku's like, how reassuring. I guess that's what friends are for. And then he says, so you're not quitting then, Garp. And he says, idiot. There's still things at the bottom of the cliff that need a guard dog. So we go over to Elbaf. We got someone crying or yelling. It says, you again. I ain't letting you on my ship. And then Rock saying, okay, it's Loki thinking about Rocks and him saying, you again, I ain't letting you on my ship. How many times do I gotta tell you, Pipsqueak? You think I want a brat on my crew? And then Roxas says, what is this? The guy I want ain't giving me the time of day, but his snot-nosed brat won't leave me alone. And then Loki says, hey, Rox, I think you're Nika. And then he says, Nika. And then, yeah, Loki says, the warrior of liberation who will destroy the world while laughing. And Rock says, destroy it. I'm aiming to be the king of the world. Besides, if anyone's got that sort of power, it's Harald. And he's like, huh? And Rock says, listen up, Loki. Somewhere out there, the Galera are slumbering. They're an outrageous band of ravagers. And the only one who can put them back into play is your pops. I'm going to continue to rally the rogues of the world. So just imagine if Harold and I teamed up. Who could possibly stop us then? And then Loki's like, wow, that's awesome. And then, yeah, he says, so why aren't you and Pop's allies already? And he says, Rock says, because of love. But I'm going to come back again and again. I don't care if it takes 100 or 200 meetings. And so, yeah, then we got him, reading the news of Rox's death and crying. Loki crying after. That's the reason he's crying, is he learned Rox has died. But, yeah, we got, it's a vicious assault. King Harold's of Elbaf is, have any civilians been harmed on a certain island? And it says no. It says he attacked another giant, some thug. It's quite a brutal scene. And then Harold says, you still don't get it. And the giant's like, I understand, really. I'm sorry. I'll never steal from humans again. And Harold's like, you don't get it. None of you do. And he's like, huge trash heaps like you are responsible for the terrors in our race's history, and that's why we can't be trusted. We only desire to peacefully engage with the world now, but they can't trust that. And then, yeah, guy's like, Your Highness, he's already out cold. And Harold says, I didn't want to jeopardize Elbaf's chances of joining the world government. That was my only reason for not helping him. And yeah, He says, I forsook my closest friend as he begged me for aid. I left him to die. There's no turning back now. I will never, ever forgive a giant who does evil. Oh, and so, yeah. The paper says Giant King loses it. And then at the Navy HQ, underground detention cell, Dragon says, Dad, I'm going to quit the Marines. And Garp says, K? And he says, I despise you. And Garp's like, K. And throws him the key. Throws Dragon the key to the cell. And then, yeah, we got Harold leaving. He says, Harold, or Ida, I guess. We see says Harold. And he says, I've made up my mind, Ida. Errol Jarl, I don't care about appearances anymore. Harwin, and then we see when he told them to get along. Says Harwin, Loki, you are both my precious sons. I want you to get along when I'm gone. And do what you can to support Elbaf. So alright, we got Marineford. It says that's a ship from Elbaf, and this is what? They say, my apologies, King Harold, but my superiors have ordered me to not let you land. So Harold says, high-ranking Marines and leaders of the world government, I ask you please hear me out. And so, yeah, he grabs his horns and breaks them off, and everybody's like, yeah. And he says, allow me to atone for the sins of the past 1,000 years. Apologize for every wrong the giant race has committed. The children of Elbaf are being raised to live without harming others, so that one day they may walk hand in hand with humanity. I do all this to prove our unwavering commitment to peace. I'll do whatever it takes to atone for our sins, even if it means becoming a slave. Is there a light at the end of this tunnel? As we see Emu's eye. Oh, alright. Next chapter. Chapter 1167. Ida's son. Oh, alright. So we got Nojiko. So cover request. A cat is scolded for stealing a book, but Gin and Nojiko aren't mad. Book suspicion encyclopedia. Alright, getting into the chapter. 33 years ago, 5 years after God Valley, a post-God Valley world. Someone says, I could have sworn pirates were approaching off the shore. Morgan says, It says, but there was something huge and shadowy emerging from the mist behind them. The underwater prison impelled down. The guy says, everything went kaboom after that. Our ship was in ruins before we knew it. We were nothing but fish food. And guy, sure it wasn't a Sea King attack. And he says, no way, it was shaped like a human. And elsewhere says, a guy says, don't tell me you were in the infamous waters of the Florian Triangle. And the guy says, fat chance. We don't fish near that region. We know to avoid it. Anyway, that monster was definitely human-like. It says, during this period, a rumor began to circulate among the Grand Line countries. They said a monster lurked deep in the foggy seas targeting pirate crews. The identity of the monster was none other than Harald. Few who sailed those waters had ever seen a giant with their own eyes, so to them he was nothing less than the very embodiment of fear. Harald now worked in the shadows to back up the Navy as part of his atonement for the last 1,000 years of history. Meanwhile, the pirates who had gone their separate ways after God Valley, so we see Kaido, Newgate, and Big Mom, it says continued to rise in prominence over the next decade or so. Each of them would peak to become a defining face of their generation. Most of these pirates simply clashed over territory. Let me see, Shiki. And guy whose name I forget. However, one crew broke through all the others and achieved a feat long believed impossible. They circumnavigated the entire world. They were hailed as the crew of the King of Pirates, Gold Roger. Public execution of the Captain Pirate King was meant to serve as a spectacle, a display of the world government's power. However, the world was plunged into even greater turmoil as countless souls set out in vast pursuit of the vast treasure Roger left behind, the One Piece. No one had anticipated the advent of the Great Pirate Era. Navy headquarters found itself caught off guard as a result. More than 10 giants were drafted into the Marines from all over the world in an effort to consolidate strength. During this stretch of time, Harold waited on the Navy hand and foot. Says, "Did you see how huge he was? He's an ancient giant. I want to make him my slave." And that very year, he was finally granted formal permission to visit the Holy Land. It says, a shallow sea contract. And then, yeah, Pluto? I forget his name. But, yeah, the boar god. Borgorose says that is correct. Consider yourself the right hand of the God Knights, God's steel. And he says it's a great honor. He says there are 3 levels of contract. The shallow sea contract is a more minor pact. The deep sea and deep sea contracts are reserved for those who are bound fully to the true God. Only 13 individuals in the entire world receive that privilege. And then Harold says, "What do you mean by God?" Nostro says, "You will only come to know the greatest depths of this world on the day you become a full Knight of God." And Harold says, "Could Elbaf become a member nation then?" And Saturn says, "Naturally, Harold. At that point, the entire world would be clamoring to welcome you." So Harold says, "I'm grateful for this opportunity to prove myself." And so we go over to Knight's Temple Shangri, domain of the gods. So Shangri-La. Assuming what that's based off of. We see Garling, a much older Garling. So yeah, it says Captain of the Knights of God for Garland family, Saint Garling. Oh, and so Garling says, "What is the Great One planning?" Somers says, "You're going to obey us even though you're King of Elbaf." And then Harold says, "Of course, just say the word." And Garling says, "We'll keep a long-distance transponder snail on hand, and if we call if we have need of you. You'll be free to travel the surface world, but you are forbidden to speak of our dealings." And Harold says, "Understood." So 20 years ago in the Fishman Island, or Ryugu Kingdom, God, Neptune and Harold just palling it up or drinking. Harold says, "I haven't laughed this hard in a long time, Neptune." And this is, "Me too, pal, Jamon. We both have our fair share of headaches, don't we?" He says, "To be honest, I don't think your son is that bad deep down. Let's not forget what your youth was like." And then Harold's like, "Well, when you put it like that." And then Neptune says, "I'm just being brutally honest. Anyway, did I tell you a fortune teller predicted I'd have a daughter in 4 years, Jummel? When the time is right, why don't we betroth Loki to my future daughter?" And then Harold laughs, saying, "Now you're going too far. Cut it out." And then he says, "Hey, don't write her off so fast. She's not gonna be just any old mermaid. My daughter will be born with a power no one else could have ever hoped to handle." Jamal. "Well, now, that does sound like the perfect match. Let's have a toast. Here's to the future of my mischievous troublemaker and your little Mosa. Yeah. And so, yeah, can kind of assume that this is who Loki's been talking to. Or it's a guess at the very least, but yeah. Yeah, Neptune says, don't call her that. She won't be Shaggy. But yeah, same time, our owl library Elbaf says, don't mention it. You're welcome to live freely here, Saul. And he says, thanks a bunch. And then Harold's like, actually, there's one thing I'd like to ask. And so we see Ripley, I think. Or Saul says, what is it? And yeah, Harold says, if we get other learned folks on Elbaf to help, will you be willing to open a school here? And Saul says, a school, huh? That's a nice idea. And 15 years ago, a major incident occurred at the Holy Land of Marijoa. Someone yells, my slaves are running away. The cells are broken. Hurry, or do you want to be their pet forever? So we see Fisher Tiger is running. And then he says, damn it, is that a God's night? And then someone, attacks him. And seems to attack, Fisher Tiger, and then he gets hit. And then, the guy says, listen, the armory will be left unlocked for you. I'll tell you the location. So he broke the whatchamacallit. Sea prism, or don't think it's sea prism, but a choker collar thing. Whew, and then someone yells, yeah, gunpowder. And then we got, Boa, Sandersonia yelling, hurry, big sis. And then Boa says, Sandersonia. And she says, there's someone out there, someone fighting to free us from this hell. And then we have Koala says, hurry, Koala, you have to run. Says this attack on the Holy Land was carried out by Fisher Tiger. In the wake of this incident, he would go on to become captain of the Sun Pirates. And Harold says, sounds like it was pretty rough. And Summers says, they say someone with the government must have left the armory open for them. Now it's up to us to find the culprit. And he says, I can't wait to execute them. And then Garling says, there's someone I want to introduce to you, Harold. And he says, huh? His name is Shanks. He's Shamrock's younger brother. They were separated a long time ago due to circumstances. He suffered many hardships in the surface world. If he were to form a deep-sea contract, I believe he'd make a great asset on par with Shamrock. For the time being, however, he's been given the rank of Godsteel, just like you. And Harold says, I know I said the same thing when I first met Shamrock too, but can't shake the feeling that I've met you before. And then, Shanks says, don't know what you're talking about. You're just some giant commoner from the surface. Don't act so familiar with me. I was blessed from birth with Garland blood in my veins. Have no doubt, I'm going to become a knight of God before you. And then Harold's like, guess I mistake you for someone else. And so we see Shanks look away, like he has like the dark marks over his eyes, like he's not happy to do it. And then Shanks says, come on, Shamrock. I wish to deepen my knowledge of the Holy Land, and I wish to apprehend that traitor to claim the credit I deserve. Are there any leads? Shamrock says, it can wait till your wounds are fully healed, Shanks. You cannot, and then Shanks says, you cannot fathom the anguish of having the last 24 years of your life wasted. No wonder the rest of the world seems so alien to me. And so, Godsteel devotee, Saint Shanks, and Knight of God, Saint Shamrock. And then, Shanks says, I hated everything down there. And then we have, Harold kind of looking back and doesn't say what he's thinking, but he's just looking back at them and thinking something. There's like ... But that same year, the fishing village on Elvaf, it says, it's no good. My medical knowledge is too limited. Let's call Harold and see if he can get us in touch with a more skilled doctor. And someone says, don't, he's got a lot on his plate now. And they say, what's the point of fostering a network with the world government if we don't use it? And so it's Ida, and she says, I can recover on my own. And then this other guy says, you keep saying that, but you're getting weaker by the day. You have to get better. Harold will be heartbroken if you don't. If you don't, whenever Harold's home, he always goes straight to the elders and begs them to allow you two to legally marry. Mato, keep the tavern open. So she says, no way, how can I when you're sick? When you're this sick, Ida. And this other guy, says that, what I said before. And so Ida says, that fool, he knows I'm happy with my tavern. I enjoy befriending sailors from all over the world. It may not be much, but I feel like I'm helping Harold by doing that. And someone yells, hey, foreign hag. And then, Loki says, Mato says, what? Loki, cook. And he says, cook up this meat for me, old hag, will ya? The tavern's my main hangout spot. I want her to reopen it. And then, guy says, good grief, that troublemaker has grown out of hand. I'm glad you've been able to keep him in line, even with Harden and his friends away, looking for a doctor. Your boys really love you. So we see Harden Road, the new giant warrior pirates, essentially. So Ida says, everyone's blowing this out of proportion. I'll be fine, but it does make me smile. So we got Elbaf Alcohol Village, hometown of Loki's birth mother. And he says, huh? What'd you just say? And he says, Giant says, we were talking about how utterly unbearable it'd be to let that foreign bitch worm her way into the royal family. You're with us, right, Loki? We're Estrid's relatives. She was Harold's true wife. We can't let anyone have a claim to our inheritance. And this guy says, that's why I slipped her a dose of poison. This stuff is fatal. Her days are numbered. And so, guy says, Mato, we can't hold off on ringing Harold anymore. And Mato says, on it. And Ida says, we may not be blood related, but I see him as the same way I do Harden. Loki is still my cute little son. And then we see Loki, the giant saying, Loki, hey. And he says, Ida isn't really gonna die, right? I still remember my birth mother, she hated me. She had thrown me into the realm of the dead. Who gives a shit about inheritance? Your whole family is nothing but trash. And he says, now answer, Ida won't actually die, right? He says, and remembers her saying, I bet you get pretty lonely, right, Loki? Wouldn't it be better to stay with us? And then, he says, she's the only mother I've ever known. His true feelings pour out. So hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, good chapter. Or good pair of chapters. But like the video, share it, sub the channel, hit that notification bell. And I will see you all next time. So, unless there's a break. So, no break. So see y'all next week then. Later.